It was the kind of storm they name after. Relentless. Thick snow falling sideways in the wind. Visibility dropped to inches. You couldn't see your hand in front of your face. That's the kind of storm that hit the small mountain town of Elridge, population 512, on January 4th, 2018. The blizzard was forecasted, sure. People stocked up, bunkered in. But no one expected it to last 5 straight days. On the second day, a call came into the sheriff's office. A man named Daniel Hoyt reported his brother missing. Ethan Hoyt, 28, had gone out that morning to check on a generator behind the house. He never came back. At first, it didn't seem alarming. A man going out in a storm. It happens. But what they found when they searched the property the next morning turned it into something else entirely. Behind the house, in snow already waist-deep, were a trail of footprints. Clear ones pressed deep. They started at the back porch and led out into the forest. About 40 yards out, they just stopped. No blood, no sign of struggle, no broken branches, no return prints, just an ending, as if the storm had swallowed him whole. But here's where it turns. The tracks didn't end due to fresh snow covering them. No, the storm hadn't touched that patch yet. It was shielded by the tree line. The footprints were clean, pristine, until they simply weren't there anymore. One step, then none. Ethan's last known movement ended mid-stride. And that's what bothered Deputy Keller most. He said it looked like someone had just disappeared into thin air. Like walking off the edge of the world. They expanded the search. Dogs wouldn't track in the cold, but volunteers combed the woods with ropes and whistles. Nothing. No Ethan. No coat. No flashlight. No signs of life or death. By the 4th day, the temperature dipped below -20. Search operations paused. Hypothermia wasn't a risk. It was a promise. On the 5th morning, the snow stopped. The sun broke. People stepped outside again. That's when they found something new. 2 kids sledding near the woods noticed it first. Footprints in the snow, fresh. Human. Barefoot. They wound around the trees and went straight toward the Hoyt property, right back to the house. Not from it, to it. The problem? No one had left the house that night. The family was accounted for. And the tracks, they were Ethan's size. But the tracks didn't lead to the door. They stopped precisely right beneath the bedroom window. Ethan's window. Daniel heard the scratching that night, he said. Like nails on glass. Rhythmic. Soft at first, then more insistent. He told himself it was ice forming. Trees brushing in the wind. He didn't open the curtains. The next day, the footprints were gone, blown over by fresh snow. But not before someone, one of the neighbors, took a photo. You can still find it online, if you know where to look. Here's where the story gets darker. In the weeks after, Daniel began acting strange. Forgetful. Distracted. The lights in the Hoyt house flickered at odd hours. Windows were found open, sometimes even cracked, despite the deep freeze. Once, a neighbor claimed she saw Ethan standing in the backyard at 3 a.m., motionless, facing the tree line. But the official search had been called off by then. One night, in early February, Daniel vanished too. Left a note, just a few lines, written hastily on a torn piece of a grocery bag. He's still out there. I think he never left. I hear him in the storm. The house was found unlocked. The back door wide open. No tracks. No signs of forced entry. Just wind howling through the hallway. The sheriff's department declared Daniel missing. Same as his brother. But unofficially, they stopped going out there. One deputy, who asked not to be named, said it best. That house gives off a pressure, like standing too close to something ancient, wrong. And when the wind hits just right, it doesn't sound like wind. It sounds like whispering. As for the Hoyt house, it still stands. Empty now, for sale for over 5 years. No buyers, no takers. Every winter, someone reports seeing lights in the windows during snowstorms. pale ones flickering like lanterns. And every few years, after a fresh snowfall, footprints appear. Always barefoot, always the same size, always walking toward the house, but never away. The snow keeps falling, but the footprints always lead back. They're watching from everywhere. Subscribe before it's too late. And tell me, where are you watching from? It was one of those blizzards that made the world feel like it was being erased in real time. Tom was a snowplow driver for a rural stretch of highway in northern Wyoming, a route so remote that if someone broke down out there, help might take days. That week, the storm had rolled in fast, swallowing the road in a white haze that even his high beams couldn't penetrate. On the second night of the blizzard, visibility dropped to near zero, and dispatch called him in early. But halfway through his route, just past mile marker 117, he saw it. An old Ford pickup, mid-'80s model, 2 doors, just sitting there off the shoulder, half buried in snow. Its hazard lights blinking faintly under a thick crust of ice. Odd thing was, the engine was off, but the headlights were still on. He stopped the plow. Standard procedure. He was supposed to report vehicles like that, stranded ones. So he radioed dispatch. Got an abandoned vehicle off 117. Plates are unreadable. I'll check for occupants. He climbed down, bundled tight in a parka, boots and gloves, and trudged toward the truck. As he approached, the first thing he noticed was the frost on the windows. Thick. Too thick. Not the normal kind. This wasn't just from the storm. It was like the frost was growing from the inside. He wiped at the driver's side window with his glove, trying to peer in. There was someone in the driver's seat. At first, he thought the person was just slumped over, maybe unconscious. But then he noticed something that made his skin crawl. The driver's eyes were open, wide open, and staring straight ahead. Not at him, not at anything, just forward, like they were still driving. Frozen solid. Tom tapped on the glass. No movement. He tried the door handle. It was unlocked, but stuck, frozen shut. He yanked, and the door creaked open with a sound like tearing fabric. The cold that poured out from the truck's cabin was wrong. Sharper, more sterile. It didn't feel like normal cold. It felt ancient. The man inside wasn't just frozen. He was perfectly preserved. Mid-30s, beard frosted, hands gripping the wheel so tightly the knuckles were bone white. But there was no ice on his skin, no rime on his clothes. Like the cold was inside him. Tom backed away, hand shaking as he reached for the radio again. Dispatch, I've had a fatality. Driver appears frozen. But something's off. I need state troopers out here now. Dispatch asked him to stay on the scene. But Tom couldn't stop looking at the interior. There was something else. In the back seat, he shined his flashlight into the cab, and the beam caught movement. Movement! Something shifted just behind the seat. He stepped closer, breath fogging up the air, every instinct screaming to get back in the plow and leave. But he didn't. There was a child back there. A little girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old. Pale, barefoot, wearing a summer dress that made no sense in the middle of January. Her eyes were fixed on him, unblinking, huge. Too big for her face. She didn't move, didn't speak. Tom blinked, and when he opened his eyes again, she was gone. He jumped, swinging the flashlight all around the truck. Nothing, just a frozen driver. The back seat empty now, perfectly undisturbed. He wasn't imagining it. He couldn't be. Tom retreated, stumbling back into the snow and locking the truck door behind him without even thinking. He stood there for a minute, trying to steady his breathing. Then he saw the footprints. Tiny, barefoot, leading away from the truck. Through the snow, out into the storm. They shouldn't have been visible. Not with the snow coming down like that. Not with the wind erasing everything in minutes. But they were there, fresh, leading off into the woods nearby. He should have reported it. He should have called it in. But something in his gut told him not to. that if he followed those prints, he wouldn't be coming back. The troopers arrived 40 minutes later. They found the truck. They found the man. But the body was different now. Still frozen, yes, but no longer sitting perfectly upright. The corpse had slumped forward, head resting on the steering wheel like it had just died. The hands no longer clenched. The eyes now closed. They said it was hypothermia, exposure. The usual. Tom tried to explain what he saw. The way the body was frozen, the lack of frost, the girl in the back seat. The footprints. But they looked at him like he was rattled, like he'd imagined it in the whiteout. The official report said the truck had been there since the previous storm. A week ago, locals recognized the man. He was a mechanic from a nearby town. Went missing driving home one night. They've been looking for him. So how are the headlights still on? How are the hazards blinking? The battery should have died days ago. That night, Tom didn't sleep. He kept seeing her face. The girl in the dress, pale as paper, watching him. 2 weeks later, he heard about another driver on the same route. A rookie, found dead in his plow. No sign of injury, just frozen in place. Eyes wide open, staring straight ahead. The plow was still running. Lights on, heater blasting, but the windshield? Frosted over. From the inside. The storm had already taken everything. It started 2 nights before, the kind of blizzard that doesn't just shut down towns, it buries them. The forecast had said historic snowfall, but no one was prepared for what came. By the second night, power was out across half the county. Roads vanished beneath drifts taller than most cars. You couldn't see more than 2 feet outside your window, just a swirling white curtain, endless and angry. For Charlie Benson, alone in his farmhouse 10 miles from the nearest neighbor, it was a nightmare made real. His generator failed that morning. The last call he made before the lines went dead was to the county hotline. No answer. Just a loop of a polite voice saying they were experiencing high call volumes. Then nothing but static. By that night, the silence of the storm was broken only by the wind screaming through the trees. The kind of sound that makes you believe the snow itself is alive, dragging something with it. Around 9:47 p.m., Charlie heard the knock. He was sitting by the fireplace, wrapped in every blanket he owned, eating a cold can of chili straight from the tin. He assumed it was the wind, maybe a branch slapping the side of the house. But it wasn't. It came again, 3 knocks. Slow, deliberate, not pounding, not desperate, patient. Charlie grabbed the flashlight, crept to the front door, and peered through the frosted peephole. Nothing, just snow and shadows. The knocks came again, this time from the back door. He nearly dropped the flashlight. His farmhouse had only 2 entrances, front and back, and to get to the rear door, you need to circle the house through knee-deep snowdrifts. In this weather, no one should have been out there. He spoke aloud, partly to the visitor, partly to himself. "Who's there?" Silence. Charlie opened the curtain beside the back door. At first, all he saw was a smear of white, then just barely the outline of a man, tall still, standing just beyond the steps. His coat was covered in frost, his boots half buried. He wasn't moving. Charlie shouted again. "You okay out there? You need help?" The figure didn't respond. Something was wrong. He couldn't explain it, just a feeling. Not fear exactly. More like hesitation sinking into his bones. Then came the 3rd round of knocks. Slower this time. Almost mournful. Charlie backed away. He didn't open the door. He didn't sleep that night. By morning, the snow had stopped. A quietness settled, thick and surreal, as if the world had been muffled. Charlie ventured outside to check for footprints. He circled the house carefully. There were none. No prints. No signs of anyone having stood by either door. But he knew what he heard and what he saw. At noon, the snowplows finally broke through. A rescue crew stopped at his house, checking on survivors. Charlie told them what happened. They didn't laugh. They didn't smile. One of them, a younger guy, maybe early 20s, turned pale. The driver, older, asked Charlie to come with them. "There's something you should see." They took him 5 miles north to an abandoned truck off the side of a plowed road. Inside, in the driver's seat, sat a man frozen stiff, eyes open, mouth parted like he'd been caught mid-breath. His hand was still gripping the wheel. Charlie recognized the coat. He recognized the face. It was the man who knocked. The rescue team said they found him early that morning, frozen solid. Estimated time of death, at least 12 hours earlier. Charlie felt like he was floating, his mouth dry, heart pounding. He looked again at the corpse, his mind racing, calculating the timeline. That man had died before the knocks. He told the team. He described the coat, the figure, the knocking, the silence. No one said a word for a long time. Finally, the younger crew member whispered something under his breath. "Not the first time we've heard a story like that. Not during storms like these." Charlie asked him to explain, but the driver cut him off. "Best not to dwell, Mr. Benson. Best to let the snow keep its secrets." That night, Charlie returned home. He stared for hours at the back door. He never opened it, but he did tape over the peephole. He never wanted to see a face on the other side again. The blizzard passed. Power returned. Roads cleared. But Charlie was never the same. Neighbors said he talked to himself more. Never left the house during winter. Kept every door triple locked. Some said he installed motion sensors, cameras, floodlights. But none of that mattered, because the next winter, during the season's first snow, Charlie vanished. No sign of a break-in. No forced entry. But neighbors swore they saw footprints in the snow, leading to his back door. Then nothing, just a door, swinging gently in the wind, and the quiet echo of 3 slow knocks. This story isn't over yet. Hit subscribe to follow the shadows. It started as a white blur outside the window, just a gentle haze frosting the treetops. Nothing unusual for rural Montana in February. But by midnight, it had swallowed the world whole. No shapes, no shadows, not even the faint outline of the barn just 20 feet away. Just white, a blank canvas of snow and silence. They say blizzards don't just bring snow, they bring isolation, disorientation, sometimes even hallucinations. I used to think that was just poetic overstatement. My uncle's cabin was miles from the nearest road, surrounded by pines that whispered in the wind like they held secrets too old to speak aloud. I'd gone there to escape, to disconnect, right? Maybe drink a little too much coffee and remind myself what peace felt like. But the storm had other plans. The power went out at 3:47 a.m. I remember the exact time because my laptop blinked out just as I was typing a sentence. The silence was almost sentient. I laughed at the coincidence then. I don't laugh about it now. By the second night, the cold had started to crawl in, not just into the cabin, but into my bones. The kind of cold that isn't just physical, but psychological. Like the air itself was watching. That's when I heard it. A voice, soft, muffled by the snow, calling my name. Eli. It came from outside. No mistaking it. My first thought was maybe a search party had gotten lost in the storm. But how would they know my name? I didn't go out. Not that time. The next day, I found footprints in the snow. Not leading to the cabin, but leading away. A single set, dragging in places like someone limping or being pulled. They vanished into the tree line, swallowed by the storm. And that night, the voice came again. Eli, this time closer, right outside the door. It didn't sound urgent or scared. It sounded patient. I stood at the window and stared into the white. Nothing moved. No figures. No shadows. Just the suffocating, snowblind static of the blizzard. But still the voice came again. Louder. Eli, like it knew I was listening. They call it whiteout syndrome. a kind of sensory deprivation that happens during extreme snowstorms. The snow reflects so much light it blinds you, confuses your depth perception. You lose all sense of direction, even time. It's not uncommon for people to walk in circles, convinced they're heading to safety. It's also not uncommon for them to hear things. But here's the thing. I hadn't told anyone I was going to the cabin. No one, not even my brother. So who was calling me? The third night, I woke up to tapping on the window. Not banging, just a slow, rhythmic tap. Tap, tap, tap. I didn't want to look, but I did. I always do. The window was iced over, just thick enough to distort shapes. And through it I saw a face, not pressed against the glass, just beyond it, pale, lips barely moving. Eli, I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the fireplace, clutching a poker like it could protect me from whatever was out there. But the voice didn't come again, not until morning. When I opened the front door to check the snow depth, something was written in the frost across the porch railing. I remember you. Those 3 words didn't just unsettle me. They unlocked something, a memory. I'd been to this cabin before, not with my uncle, but with my parents. Years ago, before the fire, before everything changed. I was 5, maybe 6. I remembered getting lost in the snow, just for a few minutes. Long enough to panic. Long enough for someone, something to find me first. A figure in the woods. A woman. She didn't speak. She just pointed back to the cabin. When I told my parents, they brushed it off. Said I'd imagined it. But what if I didn't? What if the blizzard didn't just trap people, but kept them? That night I gave in. I opened the door. I stepped out into the white. The snow swallowed me instantly. The cold was blinding. Every direction looked the same. I couldn't hear the wind, couldn't hear my own breathing. But I heard her, clear as a whisper pressed against my ear. Come back. And I saw her, just a blur in the whiteness, standing still, watching, her face unchanged after all these years. Eyes black as pitch, a faint smile like a crack in porcelain. Why did you forget me? The wind rose then, howling like an answer. I turned, ran. I don't know how I found the door again. Maybe the cabin wanted me back. Maybe she let me go. I never heard her again. But the next day, when the storm finally broke, I found something half buried near the tree lean. A child's mitten. Old, faded, blue with a little white star stitched into the palm. I remembered it. It was mine, from when I was 6, from the day I got lost in the snow. They weren't supposed to go that far, not during a storm like that. Tyler and Maddie had taken a weekend trip to the mountains. One of those impulsive getaways couples book when city life starts to fray the nerves. The weather had been clear when they left, just cold and dry. But the snow moved in fast, too fast. By the time they were halfway up the forest road to their rental cabin, it was already a blizzard. Visibility dropped to less than 10 feet. The trees bent under the weight of the snow. Tire tracks disappeared behind them in seconds. Cell service? Gone. Just a blank screen and a spinning wheel. They passed the turnoff to their actual rental, but Tyler kept driving. He swore he recognized the road. Said he'd been up here once with friends. Maddie was tense, quiet, watching the snow gather on the windshield. The headlights cut through an endless curtain of white. Then, through the flurry, something appeared. A cabin. Not the one they rented. Not even close. This one was ancient, its timbers black with rot, its windows lit with a faint orange glow, as if someone had just stoked a fire inside. Tyler wanted to keep going. Maddie said no. She didn't like the idea of getting stranded. It's shelter, she whispered. He parked. They grabbed their bags and trudged through the snow. The front door opened with a sound like a sigh. Warm air greeted them, and the scent like burning cedar and something else, faintly sweet like old perfume. The interior was cozy. A fireplace crackled. A worn armchair faced it, and beside it sat a table with a kettle and 2 steaming mugs. Maddie froze. "Tyler," she said, "did you hear that?" A sound. Upstairs. Slow, steady footsteps. But when Tyler crept up to the second floor, flashlight in hand, the hallway was empty. There were only 3 rooms, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, all untouched. Dusty. Silent. He came back down. "There's no one here." Maddie pointed to the mugs on the table. "They were hot when we came in. Outside, the wind howled. It pressed against the windows like something desperate to come inside. They had little choice. Stay in the car and freeze, or take shelter and wait it out. That night, they slept in the downstairs room, bundled up under heavy quilts. The fire snapped softly. The storm raged. At some point, Tyler woke up, not because of the cold, because someone was humming. It was coming from the hallway. A woman's voice, low, tuneless, almost mechanical. He opened the bedroom door. Silence. No one there. He stepped into the hall. His footprints were the only ones in the dust. Back in bed, he told Maddie it was nothing. Just the wind, maybe. But she didn't answer. She was wide awake, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. "I heard her too," she whispered. The next morning, the storm had quieted. A gray stillness blanketed the woods. Tyler wanted to leave, but Maddie stopped him. "Look," she said, "out the window." There were no tracks. None from their car. None from their feet. Nothing. The cabin was surrounded by untouched snow, like they had never arrived. They ran outside. Their SUV was gone. Gone. Not snowed over or buried. Just not there. The road where they'd driven up was completely unmarked, smooth as glass. Panic crept in. Tyler shouted. Maddie tried calling again. Still no signal. They went back inside, and something was different. The fireplace was out. The mugs were gone. The table was covered in dust. The whole room looked like it hadn't been touched in years. Tyler opened the front door again. The outside had changed. It wasn't just the storm anymore. The trees were wrong. Thicker. Twisted in ways that didn't make sense. The sky was dim, like twilight, but with no sun. No color. Just gray. There were footprints now, but not theirs. Tiny, barefoot prints in the snow. They circled the cabin, spiraling, stopping at the windows. That night, the humming returned, and this time it was inside. They blocked the door, piled furniture against it. They didn't sleep. The fire wouldn't light. The air turned icy. Every breath came out in clouds. Around 3 a.m., Maddie stood up, slowly, as if in a trance. "I think she wants us to follow," she said. Tyler grabbed her, shook her, snapped her out of it, but she stared at the door. She's still out there. They didn't speak for hours, just waited for daylight that never came. And then quiet. No humming, no wind, just stillness. They ventured outside again. The world had changed even more. The forest was gone, replaced by black trees that creaked without wind. The snow was red, barely, faintly, as if something beneath it was bleeding through. And in the distance, maybe a mile away, another cabin. Identical. Same shape. Same porch. Same glow in the window. Maddie turned to Tyler. "That's the real one," she said. "That's where we're supposed to go." He asked how she knew. She didn't answer. Just smiled, but not in a way he recognized. They walked in silence. The snow swallowed their steps behind them. They reached the second cabin just before dark. Inside, the fire was lit. 2 mugs on the table, a photograph on the wall, an old sepia image of a man and a woman standing in front of the cabin. The woman looked exactly like Maddie. Tyler didn't say anything. He just sat down, took the mug in his hand. Outside, the snow started again, and the humming returned. Not from upstairs this time. From below. From beneath the floorboards. It started as a detour, a small road off the interstate, cloaked in the heavy white shroud of a December blizzard. Darren had made the decision because his GPS showed traffic backed up for miles ahead, and he figured the old service road might shave time off his trip. It was risky, sure, but he was used in northern winters. Used to the ice, the snow, the sense that the world was folding in on itself with every flake that fell. What he wasn't used to was what he saw after the second mile. The snow had been relentless. Visibility dropped to feet, not yards, and the wind howled like a voice trying to break through the veil of the storm. But through the fog windshield, he spotted her. A woman, standing just off the side of the road. She was facing away, her long black coat clinging to her body, unmoving despite the wind. Her arms hung limply at her sides, and her head was slightly tilted, like she was listening to something beneath the sound of the wind. At first, Darren thought she might be a hitchhiker, or worse, a victim of exposure. He slowed, honked once. No response. When he rolled the window down, a knife of cold air stabbed through his car, but the woman still didn't move. Her posture was wrong. Rigid. Tense. Like she wasn't really standing, more like she had been placed there. He debated stopping, maybe calling someone, but a creeping sense of unease began to crawl beneath his skin. Something about her made every instinct in him recoil. Her clothes were wrong too, not just black but old-fashioned. Victorian, maybe, or at least something out of time. And even though the snow was deep and unbroken all around her, there were no tracks leading to where she stood. He drove on, but 5 minutes later, she was there again. Same figure, same spot, just ahead of him now on the shoulder of the road. No time had passed for her. She hadn't walked. She hadn't moved. She was just there, staring away. Her presence was like a hairline crack in reality, barely perceptible, but deeply wrong. Darren stopped the car. This time he got out. The cold was blinding, disorienting. He squinted through the flurries. The woman didn't react to his presence. He called out twice. No response. But then she turned. It wasn't a full movement, just a tilt of her head toward him. And that's when he saw her face. Pale, paper-like, hollow. Her eyes were too wide, and they didn't blink. But worse than that was her mouth. It was open just slightly, and the inside was black. Not dark, not shadowed, but black like an abyss. Like something inside her was waiting to speak, and the words would be something not meant for human ears. Darren ran back to the car, but when he put the key in the ignition, the battery was dead. Just like that. No warning. No dimming. Just deathly silence. He checked his phone. No signal. Not even emergency service. He was alone, with the woman in black, and the snow was beginning to bury the road behind him. He stayed in the car, watching. She didn't move. Hours passed. The sun vanished behind a veil of white and gray. And then, as night fell, she was gone. No sound. No movement. One moment she was there, the next, nothing. He thought maybe she'd left, wandered off, vanished back into whatever fold of reality she'd slipped from. But around midnight, he heard something scrape across the back of the car. It wasn't the wind. Darren froze. The sound came again, like fingernails long, deliberate, dragging along the metal. He didn't dare look, didn't dare move. For hours he sat in silence, barely breathing. And in the morning, when the snow began to ease and light returned, he finally found the courage to step out. No tracks, no markings, just one thing left behind. A single black glove resting on the hood of the car, and a name carved into the frost of the windshield from the inside. Darren, he never told anyone. Not really. He told the mechanic his battery died. Told his boss he got stuck in the storm. Told his friends he waited it out, that it wasn't that bad. But he knew the truth. Something had followed him. Something had been waiting on that buried road. Something old, something wrong, something that didn't belong to this world or the next. And ever since that night, every time it snows, Darren swears he sees her again. Not standing on the road this time. Not far away, but in reflections. In rearview mirrors. In dark windows. Watching. Always watching. And just once she smiled. It started with a warning. Class is canceled. Blizzard incoming. Go home. Stay safe, they said. But for 6 of us, home was already too far. The snow fell fast. By 3 p.m., the roads were gone, buried beneath a shifting wall of white. We were told to hunker down in the gym. Mr. Alston, the janitor, locked the outer doors. Said he'd keep watch. Said we'd be fine. He was wrong. There was something about the storm that didn't feel right. The way the wind screamed, not howled. Like it was searching. The windows pulsed under the pressure, and somewhere in the building, something began to knock. Slow, heavy, rhythmic. At first, we thought it was the pipes. Then Hannah saw it, just past the trophy case near the main hall. A shape, not fully formed, like smoke trapped in the silhouette of a man. It hovered just out of reach, watching. No one believed her until we heard the footsteps. Not boots, bare feet, wet, slapping against tile. And they came from the East Wing, where the old classrooms had been shut down years ago after that fire. Mr. Alston went to check. He didn't come back. We waited. 15 minutes. Then 30. Then his radio crackled back to life. But all we heard was breathing. When the lights cut out, we scrambled. Hannah screamed something about eyes in the hallway. Red, not glowing, flickering, like coals in a dying fire. We locked ourselves in the music room, the one with no windows. Just instruments, soundproofing, and the smell of mold. From outside the door, we heard dragging, metal against tile, like a chain or a broken leg. Then it started whispering. Not words, not language, just meaning. Cold, alien meaning, pressed into our heads like a thumb into wet clay. One by one, we started to feel things that weren't ours. Sadness, so thick it clogged your throat. Panic, sharp and precise, like a blade across your mind. And hunger, not for food, for attention. We couldn't stay. Jonah opened the door. It was standing there. Only now it had a face. Almost, like it had tried to build one out of memory. An eye too high, a mouth too wide, skin that shivered like snow on a dying fire. Jonah shut the door, but not before it smiled. We moved again, crawled through the supply tunnels behind the cafeteria, ended up in the boiler room. The heat was gone, pipes frozen over, like they'd been that way for years. Except one pipe was warm. We followed it. It pulsed, like a heartbeat. It led to the incinerator, or what used to be the incinerator. Now it looked wrong. Twisted metal, teeth like grates, ash pile high, and in the center was a shape, human-shaped, but breathing backwards. Every breath it exhaled sucked in the air around it, pulling light, sound, even thought into its core. Hannah whispered, "It's feeding." That's when the fire alarms went off. Not from smoke, from pressure. The walls groaned. The doors slammed open on their own. And somewhere above us, we heard lockers slamming in a pattern. 3, 1, 4, 1. Like a code. Like it was mocking us. We ran. Back through the gym. Out the emergency exit. Into the snow. Only the snow wasn't real anymore. It was thick. Like ash suspended in a dream. And the world was tilted. Just slightly. Just enough to make you sick when you moved too fast. The school behind us cracked. The bricks peeled like skin. And the whispers came again. This time they had words. You stayed. We shouldn't have heard that. It was inside us. We kept running. Down a hill that wasn't on any map. Toward a fence that hadn't been there before. And then, darkness. Complete, absolute. When we woke up, it was noon. Sunlight. Rescue workers. Sirens. The snow had stopped. They found Mr. Alston's radio in the East Wing. It was embedded in the wall. Melted into the concrete. Still warm. They never found him. As for the rest of us, we don't talk about that night. Not with each other. Not with anyone. But sometimes, when it snows just right, when the air turns heavy and the sky folds in on itself, I swear I hear it again. That whisper, just behind the walls, asking if we remember, and warning that it's still waiting. It started like any other winter night. A fierce blizzard swept across the northern highway known as Ice Route 43, a remote stretch of road infamous for its sudden whiteouts and treacherous ice patches. Despite the warnings, a lone trucker named Sam was making his routine delivery, pushing to get through before the storm trapped him. Around midnight, the radio crackled to life with static. Then, a voice, faint and broken, came through. At first, Sam thought it was just interference from the weather, but the transmission repeated, "Help! Stuck! Don't come!" The words were fragmented, like a ghost calling out through the storm. Sam glanced at his GPS. The location matched an abandoned stretch of Ice Route 43, where, according to local legend, travelers sometimes vanished without a trace. It was said the storm, there wasn't just snow and wind. Something else lingered, something that trapped people in endless white silence. Despite the warning in the transmission, Sam felt a pull to investigate. He drove cautiously, the blizzard swallowing the world outside his windshield. His headlights barely pierced the thick veil of snow, and every mile felt heavier, like he was slipping deeper into a forgotten nightmare. Then, the truck's engine sputtered. The cold was relentless, and the fuel gauge dropped faster than expected. Sam stopped near a bend marked by a broken mile marker, and his radio buzzed again. This time, the voice was clearer, a woman's voice. "Please, I'm trapped in the snow. If you get this, don't stop." The chilling warning sent a shiver down his spine. But Sam knew how isolated this part of the world was. Any delay could mean his own death out here. Still, he grabbed his flashlight and stepped into the storm, the wind howling like something alive, carrying whispers just beyond hearing. Walking carefully, he noticed fresh footprints leading off the road, partially covered by drifting snow. The footprints seemed human, but they vanished abruptly near a small clearing. There was no shelter in sight, only a lone, weather-beaten shack, half buried in snow, its windows dark. Sam's hand trembled as he pushed the door open. Inside, the air was frigid and the silence was oppressive. No sign of anyone, but on a dusty table lay an old CB radio, its power light flickering weakly. He tuned it, hoping for a signal, when suddenly a low static filled the room. Then a faint whisper echoed, "Don't trust the white. It's watching." A shadow flickered past the window. Sam spun around, heart pounding, but saw nothing but the swirling snow. The temperature seemed to drop even further, frost creeping along the walls. Desperation pushed him to call out, "Is anyone there?" But only silence answered. Then, from the radio, came a crackling voice again, repeating a message like a broken loop. "Keep moving, don't stay, the snow hides." Fear and curiosity battled inside Sam as the storm raged on outside. Suddenly, the shack's floorboards creaked. Something was beneath. He crouched down and peered through a loose plank, his flashlight beam cutting into the blackness. There, half buried in ice, was a frozen hand, pale, lifeless, yet oddly preserved, like time had stopped for whoever had been trapped there. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of cold decay. Sam's instincts screamed to flee, but before he could move, the radio burst to life once more. This time, it wasn't just a voice. It was a stream of garbled noises, distorted and unnatural, like whispers layered on top of each other. The shack seemed to close in, the walls pressing tighter, the cold turning biting and sharp. Outside, the storm intensified, swallowing the faint glow of the moon. Sam ran back to his truck, his breath visible in frantic puffs. The radio finally fell silent. The engine roared to life with a reluctant growl, and as he sped away, the transmission came once more through the static. "Leave before the snow takes you too." Ice Route 43 was never just a road. It was a place where the boundary between the living and the lost blurred, where the storm didn't just freeze the earth, it froze moments, trapping souls in its endless white grip. Sam made it out that night, but the memory of that final transmission haunts him still. Sometimes, when the wind howls just right, the radio crackles to life, carrying messages from those still trapped in the blizzard's unforgiving grasp. The snow was relentless that night. It started as a gentle fall, but soon turned into a blizzard so thick, The world seemed to vanish into a white void. Sarah had been driving for hours, trying to reach her family before the storm trapped everyone in isolation. The roads were nearly invisible, swallowed by drifts and swirling winds. Her headlights barely cut through the curtain of white. Then, through the storm's haze, she saw them. Faint, flickering lights dancing in the distance, glowing softly like lanterns swaying in the dark. At first, she thought they were emergency signals, someone stranded, someone needing help. But there was no sign of cars, no sounds except the howl of the wind. Something about the lights felt wrong. They didn't flicker like flames, and they didn't blink like warning beacons. Instead, they floated, bobbed, and glimmered like a spectral invitation. Her rational mind screamed to keep driving straight, to stay on the road. But her feet, or rather, her hands on the wheel, seemed drawn toward those lights. It was as if the storm itself was guiding her, coaxing her off the path. Against better judgment, Sarah slowed down and turned the wheel toward the faint glow. The road gave way to a narrow, snow-packed trail, barely marked beneath the heavy blanket of white. The lights grew brighter, almost hypnotic. Her breath fogged up the windows, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and curiosity. As she followed, the storm's noise dimmed. The wind hushed. The snow stopped falling. It was unnervingly quiet. Then, the headlights flickered off. The car was swallowed by darkness. Sarah's phone battery had died hours ago, so no signal, no GPS, no way to call for help. The only source of light was those strange, drifting orbs ahead. The trail twisted and curved deeper into the forest. Trees arched over the path like skeletal hands, their branches coated in thick ice that glistened in the ghostly light. Suddenly, one of the lights darted faster, just ahead, as if beckoning her to follow. She gripped the steering wheel tighter, her knuckles white, but her feet pressed the accelerator. The car moved forward cautiously, crunching over ice and packed snow. Then the trail ended abruptly. Ahead, a frozen pond stretched wide, its glassy surface reflecting the eerie lights. But no footprints or tire marks led beyond this point. The lights hovered low over the ice, circling slowly, almost playfully. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Her mind screamed at her to turn back, but the car felt paralyzed, as if trapped by an invisible force. And then she saw it, a figure standing at the far edge of the pond, shrouded in white, blending almost perfectly with the snow, except for its eyes, glowing a cold, unnatural blue. It didn't move, just watched. Sarah's fingers trembled on the wheel. The lights pulsed faster, surrounding the figure, illuminating it in an unsettling glow. Then, without warning, the lights shot forward, directly towards Sarah's windshield. Her vision blurred. The air grew icy cold, so cold it burned her skin through the glass. The figure's eyes locked onto hers, a silent warning. Sarah tried to reverse, but the car wouldn't respond. The engine sputtered and died. The lights circled the car faster, blurring into streaks of silver and blue. Suddenly, the windshield cracked, long, spiderweb fractures spreading outward like icy veins. Panicked, Sarah reached for the door handle, but it was frozen shut. The cold had seeped in, freezing the locks and the seals. Then came the whispers, soft, unintelligible murmurs drifting through the car's cabin, like voices just beyond comprehension. They weren't words but feelings: dread, regret, despair. Sarah covered her ears, but the whispers grew louder, almost pleading. She looked back toward the figure. It took a step forward, and suddenly the ice beneath it cracked. A loud snap echoed across the frozen pond. The figure's legs broke through the surface, disappearing into the dark water below. The lights vanished all at once. The storm returned. Snow started to fall heavily, masking everything once again. In the silence, Sarah's car suddenly roared back to life. The locks clicked open. With trembling hands, she started the engine and sped back the way she had come. But when she glanced in the rearview mirror, the pond was gone. No frozen lake, no strange figure, only an endless white forest under the storm. Sarah never spoke of that night. The storm had erased all signs of the trail, the pond, and the lights. But sometimes, when the wind howled just right, she swore she could hear whispers carried through the blizzard, warnings not to follow the lights in the snow. The snowstorm had been relentless for hours, burying the landscape in a suffocating, white silence. Mark's car was stuck somewhere between nowhere and the next town, the engine sputtering against the cold that seeped into every inch of the cabin. He'd been driving for nearly 10 hours, a simple trip turned survival nightmare. His phone was dead. The world outside was a frozen wasteland, a blizzard that showed no mercy. Panic was creeping in, slow but sure. Hypothermia was a real threat. His breaths came out in white clouds, each one feeling heavier than the last. With a final push of will, Mark decided to abandon the car. The only hope was to find shelter, any shelter. He pulled on his coat and boots, stepping out into the swirling storm. The snow muffled everything, his footsteps, the howling wind. Visibility was near zero. Mark's instincts told him to head downhill toward the dim outline of what looked like a structure. His heart thumped wildly. Was it a cabin? An abandoned house? It didn't matter. Shelter was salvation. As he approached, the outline grew clearer. A small wooden cabin, dusted in snow but unmistakably standing, like a forgotten relic in the middle of the wilderness. Mark pushed open the creaking door, and the cold air was replaced by a faint warmth. He stepped inside, and his eyes immediately caught the flicker of firelight. The fireplace was already lit. Mark froze. There was no smoke outside, no signs of life around. How could there already be a fire? Who was here? The room smelled faintly of wood smoke and something else, something faintly metallic. His breath caught in his throat as he scanned the room. The cabin was small, rustic. A table with cracked paint, a few chairs, and an old quilt folded on a bench. Nothing else seemed out of place, until he noticed the footprints. They weren't his. A set of footprints circled the cabin's wooden floor, faded but recent. Mark's pulse quickened. He wasn't alone here. Or maybe he wasn't alone anymore. Instinct screamed at him to leave, but exhaustion weighed him down. The blizzard outside howled like a beast, urging him to stay put. The fire was inviting, a warm promise in a frozen hell. He sat near the hearth, pulling the quilt around his shoulders, trying to make sense of what was happening. The wind rattled the windows, casting eerie shadows. Suddenly, a faint noise came from the back room, a soft creak like a door barely moving. Mark's breath hitched. He called out, but only silence answered. His mind spun wild theories. Was someone trapped here? A lost traveler? Or something else? Minutes dragged like hours. Mark stood cautiously and moved toward the back door. The creaking came again, but this time it was different, closer, sharper. His fingers trembled as he reached for the doorknob. Before he could touch it, the door swung open on its own. A gust of icy air blew in, and a shadow slipped out, too fast to see clearly. It was human-shaped, but something felt wrong. The fire flickered violently, casting grotesque shapes on the walls. Mark's heart hammered in his chest. He stepped back, stumbling over the threshold into the cold. The shadow vanished into the blizzard. Frozen in place, Mark debated whether to chase or flee. He chose to run, diving into the storm's embrace, the cabin behind him seeming to pulse with a silent, unseen life. Mark's story isn't just about finding shelter in a storm. It's about the eerie feeling that sometimes, when we think we're safe, something else is already there, waiting. The lit fire, an immediate symbol of warmth and safety, becomes a chilling sign that someone else had been there recently, someone who left no welcome, only mystery. It's that quiet unknown that sticks to the bones, the feeling that the storm outside isn't the only danger. The footprints inside, the shadow that slipped away, these details hint at an invisible presence, maybe human, maybe not. The story forces us to confront the terror of isolation paired with unseen watchers. The natural horror of a blizzard becomes a psychological prison. This tale also plays with the theme of false sanctuary. The warmth of the fire contradicting the cold reality that the cabin isn't empty. Mark's exhaustion makes him vulnerable, yet the true danger is not the cold, but the unknown entity sharing the space. There's a subtle layer of foreshadowing in the cabin itself. The faint metallic smell, the shadow's unnatural movement, and the door opening without touch. These details suggest something beyond human, perhaps a ghost, or something that inhabits the storm, tied to the relentless whiteout. The blizzard is more than weather. It's a force that conceals secrets, traps souls, and tests the fragile line between safety and fear. Mark's flight back into the storm is not just physical, but symbolic, a retreat from the uncanny into the indifferent cruelty of nature. If you ever find shelter during a blizzard, remember, a fire already lit might not be a welcoming sign. Sometimes, it means you're stepping into someone else's story, a story that's far from over. It started as a typical winter storm, the kind you expect in the dead of January. Heavy snow, bitter wind, and a sky so gray it swallowed all light. But for Mark, driving home late from work along the remote country road, this blizzard would become something far more sinister. The visibility was near zero, each flake an icy ghost swirling in the headlights. The snow piled quickly, turning the road into a white tunnel that seemed endless. Mark had passed the last house over an hour ago. Beyond that, only frozen fields and thick woods stretched on either side. His phone's signal was dead. No way to call for help if something went wrong. Suddenly, through the blizzard's whiteout, something flickered in the snow by the side of the road. An object barely visible. Curious and desperate for a landmark, Mark slowed down and pulled over cautiously. There, sticking out from the snowdrifts like a forgotten relic, stood an old, rusted mailbox. It looked completely out of place, no driveway or house anywhere near. Just this solitary mailbox, leaning slightly, its flag raised as if someone had just sent a message. Mark felt a strange pull toward it. Something about the mailbox felt wrong, yet he found himself stepping out into the storm, the icy wind immediately biting through his coat. He brushed snow from the mailbox door and pulled it open. Inside, there was a single envelope, yellowed and weathered as if it had been there for years. No stamp, no address. Just the name Mark, written in neat, faded handwriting on the front. His heart pounded. How could this be? Was it some cruel prank? Against better judgment, he tore the envelope open. The letter inside was brief, written on thin, fragile paper. If you read this, you are already caught in the storm's secret. The blizzard does not just bury roads, it buries time itself. Do not trust the paths ahead. Turn back before the mailbox's shadow falls on you. Mark's breath caught. The wind howled louder, whipping snow against his face as if warning him to leave. But curiosity had rooted him to the spot. He glanced back down the road. Everything was obscured, a swirling wall of white. Suddenly, the mailbox's flag slammed down violently, though no one was there to touch it. A low creaking sound rose from the woods nearby, like branches scraping metal. A shiver ran down Mark's spine. He hurried back in his car and locked the doors. The engine sputtered but wouldn't start. He tried again and again. Nothing but a choking silence. Then, through the thick windshield, he noticed tire tracks in the snow. But these tracks, they weren't his. They were fresh, leading away from the mailbox into the woods. Against all reason, Mark grabbed his flashlight and stepped back into the storm. The snow muffled his footsteps as he followed the trail, every crunch underfoot louder than the last. The beam of light cut through the white fog, revealing shapes in the trees, twisted branches like skeletal hands reaching toward him. Then he saw it, a faint glow between the trunks, like a flickering lantern. The tracks ended there, near a small, derelict cabin he had never noticed on the map. Mark's voice trembled as he called out, but only the storm answered. Inside the cabin, the air was stale, the floor covered in a thin layer of frost. On a rickety table lay another envelope, identical to the one in the mailbox, but this one was addressed simply to the lost. Mark's fingers shook as he opened it. You've come too far. The storm does not forgive the curious. Listen carefully. When the wind stops, do not follow the silence. It is not peace. It is the storm's breath holding you captive. Only the frozen know the truth, but they cannot speak. A sudden noise made Mark spin around, a faint tapping, like 1,000 nails on wood. Then the cabin door slammed shut behind him, frozen in place. Mark realized the tapping was coming from the walls, hundreds of tiny holes where the paint was chipped and something was moving beneath. He lunged for the door, but it wouldn't budge. Outside, the blizzard raged louder than ever, swallowing the world whole. Hours passed like this, Mark trapped with nothing but the wind's voice and the eerie tapping. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the storm quieted. The silence pressed down like a weight. Mark, desperate, pried open a window and looked out. The world was white and still. No footprints, no tracks, no sign that he had ever been anywhere but here. And that's when he saw it. The mailbox again, standing alone in the middle of the snow, but this time, the flag was down and there was no letter inside. Only a single word carved deeply into its wooden post. Forever. The blizzard had claimed more than the road that night. It had buried Mark inside its endless white silence. It started on a bitter January evening, when a blizzard slammed into the town with a relentless fury. The wind howled like a wild beast, and snow piled up so fast it swallowed the streets within hours. The power flickered once, twice, then died completely. Darkness stretched across the neighborhood like a heavy, suffocating blanket. I was alone in my family's old farmhouse at the edge of the woods. The power outage was nothing new in storms like this, but this time, something felt different. For 3 days, the house was cut off from the world. No heat, no light, no communication. The phone lines were dead. The storm was so fierce that leaving wasn't an option. I had enough firewood and canned food to last a week. At least I told myself. The first night passed with the usual eerie creaks and groans of an old house fighting the cold. But on the second day, as the wind shrieked outside and the snow hammered against the windows, I started hearing faint noises coming from the basement. At first, it was barely audible, a soft scraping like something dragging itself across the cold concrete floor. I convinced myself it was just the pipes settling or maybe a branch scraping the siding. But the sounds grew louder. By the third day, trapped in the freezing silence and blackness, I couldn't ignore it any longer. The scraping was joined by a low, guttural breathing, uneven, almost labored, like someone struggling for air. I didn't want to go down there. The basement door was old wood, swollen from years of moisture. It groaned under my touch. I grabbed a flashlight, my hands trembling more from fear than cold, and slowly crept down the stairs. The beam of light revealed nothing at first, just old boxes and rusty tools scattered around. But then, in the far corner, something moved. Not quite a shadow, not quite a shape. It was a presence, something that should not have been there. The breathing was louder now, closer, and I realized it wasn't human. It was something else. I froze. The air grew colder, unnaturally so, and my breath became visible, even in the basement, where it was already chilly. A foul smell seeped out from the darkness, a mixture of damp earth and decay. I pointed the flashlight into the corner and saw 2 glowing eyes staring back at me. They were small, close to the floor, watching me with something hungry and patient. The creature didn't move, but the scraping noise began again, this time circling slowly around me. Panic surged. I stumbled back up the stairs and slammed the door shut, pushing a heavy workbench in front of it. The storm outside had softened into an eerie silence, as if the world was holding its breath. That night, I barely slept. Every creak and groan of the house set my heart racing. The basement door remained barricaded, but the sounds continued. Scraping, breathing, watching. I wonder how long this thing had been there. Was it trapped by the storm, like me? Or was it something that had lived beneath the house for years, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself? The more I thought about it, the more I realized how little I knew about the house's history. I'd inherited it from my grandfather, who never talked much about the place except to warn me about staying out of the basement. He said the land was cursed. That long ago, something had been buried beneath the foundation, something that should never have been disturbed. I wished I had listened. On the fourth morning, the storm finally broke and the power flickered back on. But the relief was short-lived. I went down to check the basement. The door was wide open. The barricade was smashed aside, and the basement was empty. No footprints in the dust. No signs of the creature. Just silence. I never found out what that thing was or why it was there. But every winter, when the snow begins to fall, I can still hear the scraping just beneath the floorboards. Waiting. If you want me to continue with the next story, or write an analysis section to accompany this story for your channel at Mr. 13 O'Clock, just say the word. They said the blizzard was over. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world swallowed in white silence. But we knew better, because sometimes when nature lets you breathe for a moment, it's just gathering itself to strike again. Harder, colder, deadlier. It started that day when we thought we were safe. My family and I had taken refuge in the old mountain cabin, miles from the nearest town. The storm had trapped us there for days. No phone, no electricity, no way out. Our supplies were running low, but the sky had cleared and the wind finally calmed. The sun shone weakly, melting the snow just enough to show the jagged outlines of the pine trees around us. My brother was the first to notice something strange. He was outside, shoveling the front path, trying to carve out a route to the road. Suddenly, he stopped, staring down at the fresh snow with a puzzled expression. "I swear, someone's footprints are here," he said. We looked closer. There, in the fresh powder near the edge of the clearing, were a set of boot prints, not ours. They were fresh, too fresh, as if someone had walked right by minutes ago. But no one else lived anywhere close, and the roads were blocked by snowdrifts a dozen feet high. We hadn't heard any vehicles. No one should have been out here. An uneasy chill crept through me. The footprints led toward the dense woods, then vanished near the old frozen creek. But when we tried to follow, the snow was deeper, and the cold seemed to press down harder. My sister refused to go further, saying the woods felt wrong, like they were watching us. That night, the storm returned. It began as a faint howl in the distance, like a ghost's lament curling through the pines. The wind picked up quickly, snatching the last embers from our dying fire. The cabin's wooden walls creaked and groaned, as if warning us to prepare. We huddled inside, every window rattling with the blast of icy gusts. The power was out, so we lit candles, their flickering shadows casting strange shapes on the walls. Outside, the snow fell harder than before, a blinding white fury that swallowed everything whole. Around midnight, I woke to a tapping sound. Soft, insistent, coming from the front door. I froze, heart hammering. Who could it be? No one was supposed to be out there. The storm was fierce enough to bury a man alive. Then, the tapping grew louder, turning into a knocking. Slow, deliberate, like someone desperate to get inside. I whispered to my family to stay quiet. We didn't dare move toward the door. The knocking stopped as suddenly as it began. But then footsteps. Heavy, slow footsteps crunching in the snow just outside. They circled the cabin once, twice, then disappeared. We didn't sleep after that. The storm raged on, and with it, an unbearable sense of being watched. At dawn, the world outside was unrecognizable, a swirling chaos of snowdrifts and shattered trees. The footprints were still there, circling the cabin like a frozen spiral. But now, new prints appeared, larger, deeper, as if something massive had joined the dance. Curiosity and fear warred inside me. I wanted to find out who or what was out there, but every step outside felt like stepping into a nightmare. On the second day, we heard it, a low growl coming from the forest. It wasn't an animal I knew. It was guttural, unnatural, a sound that didn't belong in the cold silence of the mountains. Then, shadows moved in the trees. Something large, something that never fully revealed itself. My brother swore he saw a figure watching from the tree line, tall, dark, and impossible to see clearly through the blizzard's fury. It didn't move like a man. It seemed wrong. We barricaded the doors, piling furniture against them. But the sense of dread only grew. On the third day, the storm lessened slightly, and we finally dared to leave the cabin, just to find a road buried beyond hope. But then we saw it, a set of tracks leading away from the cabin, fresh and distinct, but different. There were two sets of footprints, one ours and the other larger, clawed, uneven. We didn't follow. We couldn't. That night, the knocking returned. Only this time, it wasn't on the door. It was coming from the roof. The storm had come back for us. This story isn't just about the blizzard or the cold. It's about the feeling of isolation so deep it burrows into your mind. It's about something ancient and patient, waiting in the silence left behind by nature's fury, something that thrives when you think you're safe. Because sometimes the storm never really leaves. It just waits and watches, and when you least expect it, it comes back.